had to be smallpox free. And the slaves who had come over knew how to vaccinate or immunize themselves against smallpox, because they had learned it from their own ancestors, and they used to do this, and they actually transferred the knowledge here and taught their slave owners how to keep themselves from getting the disease. And this is how polio looked, especially in the West. I don't remember ever seeing any of this even in the Kenyan museums. Polio was affecting the nervous system, and these are what are called what are they called? Iron lungs, because if it affects your diaphragm, you're not able to breathe. And for many years before the polio vaccine was made available, this is how people were managed. The ones who didn't get the limb issues got lung issues, and they were hosted in hospitals and were, okay, sorry, there's some.
It is TechnoSpark 4.
Oh, okay. Let me just try and mute them.
It is TechnoSpark 4. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Sally, are you able to mute TechnoSpark? Okay. Let me continue sharing my screen then. Sorry about that. And we find pictures of polio even in our famous brothers up north. You can see that's a pharaoh with a short limb and a walking stick, because he was suffering from polio. And we who grew up in the 80s and 90s, this was very common. The screen on the right, like there were so many children with those because they had limb abnormalities because of polio. And during the olden times, they knew how to still manage the disease. Like I said, it's the same thing we are doing, but we have more gizmos. On the extreme left, most people think that those markings on the skin are just basically for beauty, but they were multi-purpose. Like in my own community, if for you to get medication and sometimes immunization through what is called variolation, you would get those skin marks, and then something would be rubbed on you. And that's what they did for polio. And if you were not able to be managed well, you can see the missing gap in the lower teeth. And that was for lockjaw, which is caused by tetanus, because it would make your jaw muscles very stiff and you would not be able to eat or drink, and you would die. So they would knock off a few of your teeth and at least pass some food for you to survive. And if you didn't, they just either buried you, and in some communities put you out in the forest, and they would tag a rope on your foot just to make sure if you tag back, someone will feed you. If you don't tag back, they just know you went to meet your ancestors. The third picture on the screen is there were rats. These were rats being collected during the plague. In traditional times, they didn't actually, because we didn't know many things. That's why something like malaria comes from mal air. They just thought it was bad air. But women who were cooking in the house would, if they saw a lot of rats were dead, they would abandon the house and leave, because they knew the plague was coming. And when you think about it, it's because the fleas had already killed the rats, and they were jumping on to human transmission to transmit the plague to humans. And we've always had our own forms of masks. The mask on the left, the one that looks like a bird, was used during the plague. They always mask, they always did that. And the right on the right side is a fancier one that we are using currently. And for those who are in the church, this is Martin Luther, the German, not King. He wrote, "Therefore I shall ask God mercifully to protect us." This was during the plague. "Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed, in order not to become contaminated, and thus the patients infect and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. See, this is such a God-fearing faith, because neither is it brash nor foolhardy, and does not tempt God." This is Martin Luther wrote this to, I think, Father Johann in 1527 during the plague. So whatever, he was just practicing public health, even within the church confines. And so we're going to shift now to the panelists as we try and talk about now the situation at hand. Just a basic overview of the infectious agents that infect living and breathing animals, including we humans. The large ones are parasites, tapeworms. In Kenya right now, I think we've gone back to deworming people because it's become a menace again. We are familiar with protozoa like malaria, because it's a huge disease in Africa, and we are thankful for the vaccine that just came out around the same time as the COVID-19 one, though it covers about 30% of severe disease. We are so happy it's there. Fungi, if you have athlete's foot, bacteria like leprosy, which is still a problem in Kenya. In Alupe, in Busia, we still have cases of leprosy, and there's a huge leprosy population in China. And then we go to the virus side. We are very familiar with HIV/AIDS and mad cow, and which is a prion. So the particular organism we are concentrating today on is a virus called SARS-CoV-2. And I'm gonna start with Andrew and Dr. Kiragu. In the 90s, the president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, was not so sure that the HIV virus was the one causing AIDS. And the same questions have been alluded to at the current, in the current situation. There are people who are saying it's not the SARS-CoV virus causing COVID-19. How do we know that it's the SARS-CoV-2 virus that's causing the current pandemic?
This is because in patients who have gotten sick from what we call, from COVID, the only organism that has been isolated and identified as causing this disease is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, COVID-19 virus. So it's, the question you ask is,
how are we able to prove that it's the one that's causing the problem? Okay, let me just frame it this way. When you have a urinary tract infection, so, I pee in a cup, right? And then someone takes it to the lab, spins it, and just the same. What exactly are we doing to diagnose?
Same thing. You can test the respiratory secretions. So the swab that you get that people put in your nose, the saliva test that people are now doing, in those respiratory secretions, you can identify that there's virus. The question in some ways is similar to having someone ask me, how can I prove that malaria is caused by the plasmodium? I mean, and I don't know if I'm answering the question you're asking, but it's someone asking, like Tamobeki saying HIV/AIDS is not caused by the HIV virus, is like saying the sun is not up in the sky or the moon is not in the sky because I choose not to see it. I don't know. It's a difficult question. And I see Dr. Musa has his hand up. Maybe he'll help me out.
Let me try to help a bit. So, but your questions, your answers are, perfect. The thing is that you have to go back to the history of infectious disease and ask the question, how do we know what is causing a disease in any simple situation? And what you have to go back to Robert Koch, I think, who came up with
12-year-old Musa. 12-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this man called Robert Koch came up with suggestions, an experimental method to determine and show that a particular organism is causing a particular disease. And there are basically three. One is that you can isolate the organism from a person when that person has symptoms associated with that organism. If you take that bacteria or virus to or parasite and put it into someone else, that the new person who has just gotten it, the new recipient, will start showing similar symptoms. And if you can do this for many people, you need to have this organism constantly available and observable every time people are showing clinical symptoms of a particular disease. So if you apply that to COVID-19, if you ask, how do we know that it is the COVID-19 virus that is causing the disease COVID-19, the real answer really is that all people who have shown those respiratory distress symptoms, struggles in breathing, and all those symptoms that are very specific, all of them, we have isolated the virus from them. And we have not found the same profile of symptoms in people who do not have the virus. I think that is the easiest way to answer that. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Kiragu, that's step one. I'm so sorry. Diana, do you have any additional on just the diagnosis part, like for us to, adding to what Dr. Andrew and Dr. Musa said?
No, I think they explained it super well. We see the virus in the people who have that clinical syndrome. We don't see people with those symptoms who don't have the virus. And then we also test for other things in the people who have COVID, make sure they don't have bacteria, other viruses, that sort of thing. And we don't find other things. It is the COVID. Okay.
And so I want us to swing to, for the people on the panel, pathophysiology, but how exactly is this tiny virus causing disease? Like, how exactly is the SARS-CoV-2 causing COVID-19, the disease? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
That sounds like a question for the immunologist.
Yeah.
I feel like.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's the question for the doctors, and then yeah.
Oh, okay. Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Okay, let me give you an example of malaria, because I come from Kenya and my Professor Estambale will be so proud of me. The malaria parasite gets into the cells, and preferably, let's say it gets into the red blood cell and destroys the red blood cells. So that's how you get, your anemia, and the products it produces by that destruction go ahead and cause the fever, the joint aches, and the pains and everything. And when the parasite gets into your brain, that's how you get cerebral malaria, you get seizures and all that stuff. Are we able to just talk about SARS-CoV-2 and how it's causing everything that we are seeing from head to toe, literally?
I'll take a quick stab from
Okay.
an immunological standpoint, which
Okay.
is rudimentary. I think the doctors will not embellish, will
Mm.
add meat to the skeleton that I think I'll provide. So basically, you're on a train, you are somewhere, you breathe in air, like you breathe in normally. And in this air, you are breathing in. Unfortunately, it is contaminated, or you touch something that someone who has the COVID-19 virus has touched, and you basically touch your face and breathe in, whatever transmission method we are talking about. So you breathe in this air, and it has a few virus particles. And of course, you breathe through your nose, basically, and so the air goes up, and you are fine, you are breathing okay, but you don't know that you've breathed in a few viral particles. And so they'll go up into your nose somewhere here as the beginning. And then what basically they will do is they will sit there for a few hours, and then they will start increasing in number because it is a great environment for them. And as you do that, remember that you are continuously breathing in. So you are pushing them further and further down into your lungs because that's where your air ends. And what eventually happens is that you have a few viral particles that get into your lungs, and then they start sitting there. And the first thing that happens is that you have an immunological reaction. Basically, those viruses are that virus or viruses, because they're now becoming many, are seen as foreign. They don't belong to your body. And suddenly what you have is the first line of defense, where basically, let's not complicate it, you have immune cells that begin coming into your lungs and try to remove those viruses. And by the time they sit in your lungs, they have broken down a few mucus barriers that line your lungs, and suddenly they're sitting there. And so what you really have in the early phases of the disease, 3 to 7 days, is an immunological reaction that begins to attack the virus. But at the same time, you have a virus that is replicating and increasing in number and starting to take on larger and larger spaces of your lungs. And you also have your immune cells trying to do their best to destroy this virus and remove it. It is that reaction that starts to cause the fever and starts to make you react and start to have you cough. And you have a few of those viruses also coming to the back of your throat. And then you start having that irritation and that cough, which is very symptomatic of what people say. And then after I say that, I will let the doctors take over from there.
Okay. And so after all, the whole breathing system is affected. Now we for it to get to Dr. Kiragu or Dr. Diana, it's gone further. It's far. English is my third language. Okay, far enough into your body. So I just want Dr. Kiragu, you can start off because you're the one with the children. How is it manifesting? How are they showing up? And you can start from the whole range of symptoms you're seeing, and why we are afraid of this disease, because we've not seen something like this before. And then Diana, you will cover the adults. So Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so asante, Dr. Musa, for helping us clinicians and explaining. But essentially, as Dr. Mulongo mentioned, the virus enters the body and it enters into cells. And as most viruses do, it starts replicating, means it starts making copies of itself. And as it makes copies of itself, it also, the body tries to figure out what is going on. The virus also destroys what a group of cells called T lymphocytes, which is why patients with the viral infection will have low numbers of these types of cells. But it continues to grow and make additional copies, goes into various parts of the body, into the lungs, causing an increased inflammation, which results in all the symptoms that we see. In different populations, we see this happen to a different degree. So that is why some patients who get infected with COVID may not be symptomatic. And initially, early on, in the early phases of this pandemic, children seemed to be the least, excuse me, impacted. So you would have children who had COVID and tested positive for COVID, but they were not very symptomatic. They might have had mild symptoms like a runny nose, maybe a slight cough, maybe they just felt tired, but they were not that symptomatic. But as you got older, that's when people were becoming more symptomatic. In this newer phase of the disease, as we're seeing different variants, now what we're noticing is it may be in some ways, perhaps the virus is adapting. And so we're seeing children presenting with more symptoms, presenting more sick compared to the kind of the cases that we saw earlier on. Something that is was initially thought to be just specific to kids, but is now also being described in adult patients, is something called multi-system inflammatory syndrome. So it used to be called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, or MIS-C, but there's also a MIS-A that is now being described in adults. And here you have essentially the virus, patients who have had the infection with COVID, some weeks after the infection, developing this syndrome where they present with impacts on many systems in their body, their eyes, their GI tract, having, vomiting, diarrhea, having lung symptoms, having cardiac or heart symptoms, where the virus has impacted how their heart functions, and having a significantly revved up immunologic response that can make the children quite sick. Unfortunately, some children have died from the MIS-C. And this is something that initially was just seen in kids, like I said, but now is being seen in adults. So with the COVID, of course, like I said, with different age groups, it affects them differently. And even those kids who are not significantly symptomatic, they are still able to spread their disease to their adult counterparts, to their other kids in their school or in their home. So that's how we are seeing the infection now spreading. And especially the younger kids, the ones that are called the cuddlers, because everyone wants to hold that baby or that toddler, give grandpa, grandma a hug. Everyone wants to hug them, but they're the ones with COVID, and they're, even though they're not that sick from COVID, they are making their loved ones, older loved ones, sick.
Okay. I'm trying to share a screen of MISC, and it's not helping, but I'll share it when I find it. Diana, are you able just take us through what you're seeing on the adult side?
Yeah, so I'm primarily in the ICU, so I tend to see the people who get the sickest with COVID, but we are seeing predominantly lung involvement, but also some heart and kidney involvement and some brain involvement. Sometimes COVID can cause blood clots and cause strokes that way as well. So it's very variable, although the most common manifestation is the lungs. Like Dr. Malongo said, it gets into your lungs and starts there, kills some lung tissue, and then your immune system makes this inflammatory response that initially is helpful, but then turns out to be counterproductive because the inflammation itself starts to damage the lung tissue. So we see COVID pneumonia, which is this terrible inflammation in the lungs where people can't breathe. So initially they have very low oxygen levels, just breathing room air. Then we add oxygen and that helps for a little while, but they often keep getting worse. Then sometimes we have to put breathing tubes in their mouths and put them on ventilators. Oftentimes they die despite that. And this is people, I mean, we've had, I think our youngest patient, and that's partly because we only see adults, but we have seen 18, 19-year-olds who get sick enough with this to end up on the ventilator. Not a high percentage of those 18 and 19-year-olds die, but it is a very long illness, weeks, months of laying in a hospital bed and being sick, being on a ventilator, and then being incredibly weak if you survive, and having a super long recovery period. Now, one weird thing about COVID that I think you guys alluded to is that some people have very mild disease, and we don't understand really why some people die from it and some people have hardly any symptoms from it. Certainly age is a factor. People who are overweight do worse. Men do worse. Diabetics do worse. But the thing is, once you get it, if you are one of these people who get the COVID pneumonia, there is virtually nothing we can do except try to support your body through it to see if you make it. So the key is preventing it by social distancing, masking, and getting the vaccine. And then if you get it, here in the US, we do have some very early treatments that have shown effectiveness, but they're not very widely available. And once you get sick with it, there is no effective treatment, and it's awful.
So,
okay. Yeah, mostly just add, yeah, you can add something on.
Two things. Firstly, just to simplify things, when you hear inflammation, I want you to think about it as a battleground where the good guys and the bad guys meet and they do a crazy battle and the trees get destroyed and the bombings happen. That is what essentially we are saying is inflammation. It's a battleground in your cells where they're getting destroyed and you're having the virus trying to persist and your immune cells trying to do something about it. So the other thing is I have had COVID, severe COVID. I'm turning 45. I've had severe COVID earlier this year. It is nasty, nasty, nasty. I think I stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks and I didn't get to the ICU at least, but I wanted to just make a quick comment that we have a tendency of underestimating it when it is starting. And even when I was in the hospital, I wasn't coughing too much. It was just fever, hallucinations. But when we did an X-ray after 8 days of continuous fever, about 62% of lungs were gone, were not functional. And I wouldn't know. And what happens is people stay with this. They don't feel, they say they're getting better and it is not so bad, but without any imaging and without any insight on what is happening in your chest, you can get your oxygen levels drop very fast and then things go haywire after that. Thank you.
Okay, and as Diana and Kiragu have alluded to, the best chance we have to fight COVID as it is now, because we don't want you, I do not want you to end up in Diana's and Dr. Andrew Kiragu's hands at all, or in the situation Musa had. The best chance we have is the COVID-19 vaccines, and there are several. And this has to just be Musa's playfield. The rest of us will just be over here listening. So Musa, just take us through it. And you can start all the way from, I think people think mRNA is a foreign thing. From this to my toe, mRNA was involved. And if you want a picture of the cell, I can share so that you can, as you explain about vaccinology, immunology, and how vaccines really work. See, people prepared. Thank you. Take it away. And you start from the beginning so that we don't see everything. You know that thingy there, the one? Yeah, thank you. Musa, you're mute. You're still on mute.
It should be at the bottom of your screen,
Yeah.
bottom left.
No, oh, that happens when you share your
There
screen.
you go.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Is the screen still being shared?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. No, sorry about that. So I'm just going to quickly take you through a few slides that I have used before. It's a quick lesson on what vaccination is, broken down its very simple way. To vaccinate, we trick the immune system to think that it is fighting the real infection. That's it. We give you it's a trick where we take what we would call a safe or unharmful. We either kill the virus causing the disease, or we take a few pieces of it that we know the immune response sees, which is really a few proteins from it. If in the case of COVID-19, it is one protein sequence, the spike protein. And what all we do is we take that protein from the virus and we inject it into you, and you have your immune cells scrambling around thinking that they have COVID-19, that your body has been invaded by COVID-19. And what happens is basically memory develops. Your immune system has a fantastic system where it remembers everything it has ever seen. So you have a few cells all the time sitting there after they have seen something, and then they go back and rest in your lymph nodes. And then next time the same infection comes, once they see the same protein pattern, then they explode and quickly increase in number and then attack the virus. So immunization really is tricking your immune system with a little protein sequence or a molecule that we know can be found in the real pathogen. And then we let that sit there, you develop memory to it. And then when you have the real infection, you have an explosion of the immune system. Your cells are increasing in number very quickly because they remember that they have seen this protein before. That's all we do. That's the basis of vaccination for all diseases, literally, if you want to think about it that way. And that applies also to the viruses. So I will quickly just deal with, and there are many types of vaccines, but I think I'll just take a few minutes to talk about the RNA vaccines, because people have there are many questions that people have raised about them. So I like using this very simple analogy of DNA or of a house when talking about DNA, RNA, and protein. When you think about it, all of us, together with plants, are made of DNA. It is what we call the genetic code. Is the language of all living things. What distinguishes them is how they are arranged. Basically, that is it. So everything about you is encoded or sits in your DNA, in the nucleus of your cells. And the DNA is the master book of forming an organism, be it a plant, be it a tree, be it you, a little baby. Basically, the instructions come from the DNA, and then RNA is an intermediate translator, which actually translates the message, the language of the DNA, and then makes the protein that then make us, and that construct our noses, our eyes, and everything. So when you think about it, if you are building a house, DNA would be your plan that the architect has put together. RNA will be the process of translating that plan that is just a drawing on paper into an actual structure. And protein is really the functional house that you now live in. Nobody lives in the plan that was drawn. People live in the real house, which is really the proteins. So when we talk about RNA vaccines, what we are basically doing is we are taking RNA of the COVID-19 virus, packaging it in a way that we inject it into you, and that the RNA that we put into you for now for the COVID-19 protein is for the spike protein. It is the one that antibodies see, and antibodies are produced to. So basically we take that little molecule, but we don't take it as a protein, like has been the case before. We take it as RNA. And what happens is once we inject it into you, your own body cells will take it through cellular processing and will produce the protein. And then, so instead of giving you protein from COVID-19 virus, we are giving you RNA, which your body will process into proteins that will be seen as foreign. It is a quicker way to be able to, and we're using your own body to be able to have this protein produced. What's important, and you guys might wonder, why have people gone into the RNA technology? The real work around that has been the struggle around producing a protein that exactly looks like the protein in the virus. That is the reason why we try to use RNA technology, because once your body processes that RNA and gets us a protein, it will be folded in a way that really resembles the original protein that you would find in the virus. If you use other methods, it is not always easy to get that folding, which is essential and important to generate the response that you want. So I'm going to leave it at that. That is just an explanation of how it works. That's a little explanation of the other AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine that uses, that takes the DNA and then expresses it in viruses and then produces it. I just wanted to come to the message, and then we can also go back and talk about the vaccines themselves. But I think that there has been a lot of messages around vaccination that make people confused and make people start asking, why is it that people who have been vaccinated, why are they getting sick again? Why are they getting the virus? What is going on? And there's as many different explanations for these things on the internet, some of them not true and some of them may be true. And some of them are truth mixed with a little lie here and there. And it becomes very confusing for those of us who are not trained in this area. But I just wanted to emphasize that we need to understand why vaccination is done. It is done to reduce the development of severe clinical signs of COVID-19. It doesn't mean that you might not cough for a day or two. It doesn't mean that your lungs may not hurt a bit. It just means that you will not have severe clinical signs of COVID-19 if you are vaccinated. And I will say the majority of people will not have severe clinical signs of COVID-19 if they're vaccinated. 5 to 10% of people might still have some of these signs based on our differences as human beings in terms of our health and other underlying diseases. 2, we vaccinate so that you will reduce the length of time between catching the disease to recovery. You've heard Diana talk about weeks and sometimes months. There is evidence that if you're vaccinated, you might have a shorter course of disease, maybe 5 to 10 days, and not necessarily the weeks and months that we see. We also vaccinate people to reduce the likelihood for hospitalization. If you have mild symptoms, meaning that you have less severe disease, it means that you will not necessarily end up in a hospital bed, and you might be managed from home. We vaccinate to reduce the likelihood of your death from COVID-19, and we vaccinate to reduce the likelihood of you infecting other people. You could, but because of the shortness of the duration of disease, because of the reduced severity of the symptoms, you might not really infect other people. That is why we vaccinate. Vaccination for COVID-19 does not stop the virus from entering your nose and mouth and staying there for a while. That is important. That's why we can say people are vaccinated, but when we do the COVID test for some, if they have gotten into contact with the virus might still sit there but cause less disease. That's what we just said. The vaccination may not stop you from infecting someone else, and vaccination does not stop you from getting sick with a new variant of COVID-19. It just reduces the likelihood of severe disease from the new variant. And I don't want to complicate the discussion by going into variants, but if need be, we can talk about that. Thank you. Back to you, Posa. And
I think that's the problem with the messaging out here. And I'm going to fault my public health people. We've been saying that vaccination prevents you from getting disease. I wish this vaccine endpoint for this particular, because different vaccines have different vaccine endpoints. A case in point is my favorite vaccine, the HPV vaccine. We are just now seeing the endpoint. This is a vaccine that we started administering in 2006, if I'm not wrong. And right now is when we are seeing the data that it's really helping prevent cancer of the cervix, oral cancer, anal cancer, and all that stuff. The vaccine endpoint, as Dr. Mulongo has said, is just preventing hospital. Like, I do not want you to end up with Diana or Kiragu in hospital. No, that's our science communication skills as physicians and the scientists just sucks. It's not Sabbath, so I can say sucks. There's a question on the chat. Any major relation, and participants both on Facebook and on the Zoom, you can ask, you can put the questions in the chat. Is there any major relation between COVID-19 infection and autoimmunity? How are the statistics from the ICU patients? Diana or Kiragu, do you want to take a stab at that?
I need to understand the question a little bit more. What they mean by relation between infection and autoimmunity.
Is Evans on the Evans? You can actually unmute and ask the question. Evans, go ahead. Evans. Oh, sorry, I'm muttering. Evans, go ahead. Okay, well, yeah.
And
just
while
go
they're
ahead.
talking, I just want to I just want to maybe push back a little bit on what you said about the failures of public health officials.
Communication.
I don't know that. How can I say this? We live in a very different world where it has now become so commonplace for people to essentially disbelieve science, disbelieve their physician, disbelieve scientists. Because of course of the internet, now people have access to all kinds of information, or I should say misinformation, which is why a disease, at least here in the US, which has killed, I think we're over 700,000 people now. In less than 2 years, people are talking about, there's no such disease. I mean, what disease in the history, recent history, has killed so many people around the world in such a short period of time, and yet you have people still pushing falsehood, false beliefs on others. So you can talk, you as a public health official can try and say as much as you want, but if someone has chosen not to believe, like Thabo Mbeki chose to believe HIV didn't cause AIDS. What now imagine now if that message was through the world on social media, instantly accessible, being pushed by people who have significant media following. It's a difficult thing. So I think people have been pretty honest and open about this disease and the importance of vaccination. But there are many people who have chosen not to hear it. And unfortunately, a lot of those people happen to be here in the US. But it's also, I think, just as there are people who don't want their kids to get vaccinated against common diseases, it's the, how do I say, in some ways, it is the blindness that comes with privilege. So if you've never had to deal with a disease, I don't want to get vaccinated, and not realizing just you're just fortunate that people around you don't have the disease, but if they did, your child would also get sick. But now people are dying because of that kind of willed ignorance or misinformation. But I've talked too much. Evans had a question.
Evans, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. There's a muted talk currently that severe COVID-19 infection leads to autoimmunity, also for patients who are admitted in ICU. Now, I'd love to know how the statistics are there, how the stats are in USA in relation to this.
Diana?
Yeah, sure. I think the short answer is it's too early, and we don't honestly know if autoimmunity is playing a role in so-called long COVID. I mean, and again, Dr. Malongo might have some more insight into the immune aspects of it, but it seems to us anyway that there's not an autoimmunity per se, but it's more just the immune system in this sort of battlefield concept where, you know, the virus is being battled by the immune system and the battlefield is your body, and your body is sort of getting destroyed in the process of this battle. And that's a little bit different than autoimmunity, but to some extent, the results are the same. Is that there's just this huge destruction that may kill you. And if it doesn't kill you, it's going to take a really long time to resolve. Now, might there additionally be like a permanent autoimmunity thing that happens? There might, but I'm not aware of any. And it may just be that it's too early to tell.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. From an immunological standpoint, autoimmunity, if for those of you who don't understand, is when part of your cells and tissues are seen as foreign, and the body the immune system starts to attack them as if they are the virus, basically. And so I am not sure, those are usually diseases that are genetic in nature. There is really very little data around infectious disease and autoimmunity. If there is, it is very temporary, short-lived autoimmunity. My comment around this will be related to the safety of some of the vaccines. People are still speculating around the mechanisms that have shown where you have a little bit of a small population showing heart inflammation and pericarditis and the myocarditis and pericarditis, where you have inflammation of the heart and the tissues around it. And people are speculating that there may be some resemblance between the spike protein of the COVID-19 vaccine that is used in the vaccine with some of the people's on some of your own proteins for that small number of people. But the truth is that the short answer, Evans, is that it's too early to tell exactly, like Diana says. It takes time to accumulate evidence around this. And we are not dealing with people at the same age, with the same clinical profile, with the same genetic profile. People are different as trees and plants. And so what happens is that it will take time for all this information for research into this to be formalized in a way that we can in fact say, yes, there is a relationship between severe COVID-19 and autoimmunity. We need to have a large enough sample size over the years to be able to show that. Thank you. But at the moment, I'm not sure that I can even comment on that. My own opinion is that it is highly unlikely. Thank you.
No.
And I'm just going to jump in and say that you mentioned the reaction to the vaccine, right? That there's some rare instances of myocarditis and pericarditis. And I think that gets taken up on social media and people say, you know, look, the vaccine's not safe. But the fact of the matter is that is very rare, right? Hundreds of millions of doses of these vaccines have been given out throughout the world, and we've seen that super rarely. And we see all of this really horrible stuff with the COVID infection. right? So the risk of getting an infection is huge. The risk of getting the vaccine is minuscule, even though maybe some of those risks are similar in nature, they are not nowhere near similar in scope.
Yeah.
So just want I know you didn't mean to suggest that the vaccine was unsafe. I just wanted to
Yes.
totally clarify that. It's very, very safe.
And also just in additional response to Evan's question, and to add on to what everyone has said, there are some studies ongoing to look at the relationship between SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 and these autoimmunity in the pathogenesis of what people call long COVID, and why people who have had COVID don't recover and are just continuing to be symptomatic. And then some newer studies trying to figure out if there's any relationship between the production of antibodies against one's own body and the severity of illness and COVID infection. But those are newest and smaller studies ongoing.
Okay, and and Musa, can you just cover a bit about the booster? What exactly do boosters do, and why are we, like here in the US? I'm getting my booster today, and I have no pre-existing anything. I know it comes from a point of privilege because, like, my 12-year-old niece in Kenya cannot get a vaccine yet. But just talk about boosters in general, because I've gotten a question about that. Like, is it does the body need to be reminded, hey, we still have COVID out there, what's happening?
That's a tricky one. Because so typically once you develop memory, we hope that you can respond pretty quickly. The thing with boosters is that, and this is really important, and I don't know what the medical doctors will say, I'll be keen to hear what they say. The truth is that people have been saying antibodies to COVID-19, to the COVID-19 vaccine go down after 5 to 6 months, some 3 to 5 months, that's what people say. And then the argument is, well, you are not protected within that period. That's why you need a booster. The truth is that we don't go around with high antibody levels to everything that has ever infected us. It is so much energy to keep producing those antibodies. That's why we have memory kept. And the real question should be, how quickly can you mount a response against a secondary or subsequent COVID-19 exposures? That's really the question. How quickly can you have your B cells, memory B cells, start producing the antibodies? So technically speaking, you should be fine. There have been 1-year studies, I think, in Israel and many other places that show that the antibodies persist for quite a long time, and they seem to be effective. You might have protection reducing from 95% to maybe 70s or 60s, but it's still really pretty solid protection in a sense. The issue around boosters is that we have a heterogeneous population of mixed people. Some people have immune dysfunction. You have problems with establishment of memory in some people that are congenital. People are born with that. And so if you look through the population, as a proportion of people might need boosters to be up to date, so that you just have circulating antibodies all the time that are ready, especially if you have problems with memory and things like that. But overall speaking, okay, and I don't know what the physicians will say, for some viruses, you have defects in establishment of memory, and sometimes you need boosters. I don't think that the need for boosters in COVID-19 is well established. I think it is a precautionary public health measure to make sure that people who are vulnerable based on their underlying diseases, and first line responders like you doctors and nurses and others, to make sure that they're up to date, just in case in the event that they do not have well-established memory, the fact that they have had a shot more recently, they can get protected. I just doubt that we want to make an ending boosters a normal in the general population. I think that it is highly unlikely that that is going to be the case. Finally, and I think importantly, the people talk about variants, and variants really are the fact that the virus keeps on changing and mutating, and the immune system has to catch up. So even if you are vaccinated, the virus might have changed a few proteins, a few proteins in the pattern that is seen by your immune system, and then you do have infection. But even in the case of variants, the Delta variant and others, there is still data that shows that vaccination against the original virus that started circulating 2 years ago still confers a measure of protection against variants. I think that's all I can comment. I've introduced this story. You just asked me about boosters. I've given my opinion. I don't know what the medics say.
Medics.
Medics.
I think they have disowned you, right? Okay, the medics, do you have do you want to add anything? And someone in the chat has asked, why isn't Africa seeing why hasn't Africa had severe and devastating COVID-19 as largely expected by various models? And we can, Musa, I think you have more stats than us, but you'll comment after the US-based medics have spoken.
So I guess I'll start. I think that's a really interesting point about the boosters. I think we're also scared of COVID, that, we're like, yeah, everybody get the boosters because we want to totally wipe it out. But the fact of the matter is that young, otherwise healthy people who have had their standard vaccine might get illness. We, at least so far, don't see any people young and otherwise healthy who have been vaccinated getting sick enough to be in the hospital or in the ICU. You could make an argument that we young, healthy people should get our boosters to try to get rid of the COVID, to protect the elderly and the immunocompromised people. But otherwise, I think you make a very good point that maybe the boosters aren't going to be quite so necessary to prevent severe disease. You might get COVID, but you'll be sick for a few days and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But Posa, you should still get your booster.
I'm getting it comes with 50 bucks. It comes with 50 bucks. I'm taking
You
it.
should do it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Dr. Karagu, your thoughts?
No, I agree with Dr. Mlongo. I mean, I think it is that's a very interesting point in terms of the heterogeneity of the population, that there are some people, and I know that's why booster shots started with people who are immunocompromised, who are getting cancer therapy, because their response to the vaccine was less clear. And then to the elderly, that's the group. And then, of course, as you alluded to healthcare workers who are constantly being exposed to COVID because of caring for patients, so as to make sure, just in case there are those whose amount of memory or their circulating antibody is not high enough to prevent them from being too ill. But now, of course, because we live in a privileged society, now that has been expanded. And again, I think, as you alluded to, this is in many ways precautionary. And it may not be that everybody needs to get a booster shot. But I think what you said is, I agree with what you said in terms of the need for boosters and the population of patients who need, or people who need to get the booster shot. With regards to severe and devastating COVID-19, I'll wait to hear from Dr. Mlongo, but I think that there may be some population characteristics that explains something, but not entirely. We have had waves of COVID-19. There are many people who have died from COVID. Unfortunately, I lost several relatives to COVID. So severity has different meaning to me And then, of course, there are many situations where we have not had accurate statistics. I know in Nairobi, in Kenya, there were some questions about the statistics the government was giving, although Kenya is ahead in many ways. Our neighbor to the south, until the new president came to being, had refused to even acknowledge who had COVID. So we don't even know how many people had COVID. The former president died from COVID, but what they said is that he died from atrial fibrillation, which, as a physician, it's a big sounding name of heart disease, but people don't die from atrial fibrillation like that. And certainly not the president of a country who has access to a cardiologist who can give him medicine for. So I think we have to be cautious about, are we dying in the numbers that we have in other parts of the world? Probably not. But maybe Dr. Mlongo has some explanation immunologically, but I think we might be just lucky. And
we are not using the word luck here.
So I think frankly, we need studies on this question. I have a few theories. I think the way Africa is structured is older people generally stay at home, the more vulnerable people. They are not in nursing homes in groups, like in the Western world. Ours are in the villages mostly, with a few grandchildren, very much removed from the urban centers that are highly populated. Think about our food chain. We all don't go to Walmart or Costco, to big supermarkets, and meet there and buy our food from there. If you think about that, we have little shops scattered around the countryside and everywhere. So it is, but at the same time, we sit in public transport that is in very close proximity most of the time without masks. And so the truth is that we don't know. I think we generally have a younger population. There are some theories that we have such a high burden of infectious disease that it is possible that we may have come across COVID-like viruses, okay? And so maybe we are maybe walking around with some immunity, some cross-reactive. For the experts will understand what I mean, immunity against that. I don't know how true that is, but we have evidence of memory T cells existing in people before the COVID-19 pandemic, which means that we have seen COVID-like viruses probably. And in Africa, if you look at how we live generally, it is likely that we may have some form of immunity, but that is me speculating. We have no data around that. And exactly like Dr. Arias said, I know many people who have died of COVID-19. And I think that what I would query more may be less around severity. It might just be why the outcome in Africa has been mild, rather than why Africa does not have COVID-19. I think we do have COVID-19, it's just slightly mild. And who knows whether there are genetic factors also involved. I have no idea. We can just speculate, but in the absence of proper studies around this, I'm not sure I can say anything much.
An interesting note, like in Kenya has never had like Ebola, but we have Ebola antibodies, as in it's been studied. We are weird people, peculiar. Let's just use the word peculiar. So, and when you think about it, if my grandmother dies in the village, she's laid on her bed for 3 days and washed there. There's no death certificate, there's nothing. She just died. And they will call it Olumbe, just a disease, and we go on. So we need statistics. We just need to study Africa a bit more, and maybe we have an answer there that we don't know of. And someone else speculated that the large herds of big animals in Africa are actually like they're contributing to the herd immunity. I don't know. I heard of that. I was like, I need to read a bit more on this. I know the elephants.
Okay, I want to one now. Watch a mambo.
Diana, sorry, sometimes you go to Kenya. I'm gonna send you the study, Andrew. Trust me, I read that stuff. Okay, let's ask. Let's answer the questions in the chat. Let's talk about vaccine injury and vaccine death. And the other one is specifically for you, Diana. Are you seeing multi-organ where severely ill patients die? Have you guys encountered any deaths that are attributable to multi-organ failure? So we can start with you, Diana, and then we can go to the vaccine injury and death.
Yeah, so quickly, much of it is lung, respiratory failure. It seems to impact kidneys as well. So we've seen a fair bit of renal failure. A lot of these people end up on dialysis. People get blood clots. So we will sometimes see, blood clots to the lungs, massive pulmonary emboli, sometimes blood clots to the brain and strokes. We see less sort of septic shock and hypotension, low blood pressure. But a lot of times they do end up when they die with multi-system organ failure. In terms of our outcomes, they are not good by the time people come to the ICU. I mean, by the time someone is sick enough to come to the ICU, half of them die, 50%. And
this is a fancy ICU. Trust me.
This is a fancy ICU where we keep people alive for a long time. I mean, we have levels of support that are border on the ridiculous, in my opinion. Yeah. So the outcomes are not good if you are unlucky enough to get sick from the COVID. And I'm going to just quick jump to the vaccine question. Is there a way to predict who's going to get sick from the vaccine? I'm not aware of any. And I'm also not aware of any, though, way to predict who's going to get sick from the COVID. Again, overweight people seem to do worse. Men seem to do worse, but there certainly are overweight men who do okay. And there are thin women who don't do okay. So it's really hard to predict. I hope someday we are able to predict who's at risk for dying from COVID or having a complication of the vaccine. I would just go back to the magnitude of the risk from getting COVID is huge, and the magnitude of the risk from the vaccine is tiny. So the vaccine, even though there are some complications, I'm personally not aware of any deaths directly attributable to the vaccine, but I'm sure they're out there. But your risk of getting the vaccine is tiny, and your risk of getting COVID and dying from it, at least in the US and probably in Kenya, is huge. So
yeah,
No,
I agree. I mean, I think for us in pediatrics, again, a lot of pulmonary disease, young children, and I've had babies who come in with COVID. Some who end up being kind of sick, 80-year-old kids coming in with severe COVID. I had a teenager die from COVID. I mean, this is a disease that is a very worrisome illness. With regards to death from the vaccine itself, I would say that is extremely rare because remember, I mean, unless you have an allergic reaction to the components of the vaccine itself, and there are described cases of people who've had allergic reactions to the component of the vaccine. But even in those patients, the number of people who've died from that, I think, is minuscule. And based on the billions of doses of vaccine that have been administered, death from just getting the vaccine, I think that risk is minuscule. I mean, the things that have been described, arm pain, fever, feeling kind of unwell, kind of minor reactions to the vaccine, yes, those are there. But actual death from the vaccine itself, boy, I personally have not seen or heard of any here in the state of Minnesota, but certainly heard about a lot of people who have died from not getting vaccinated. And the patients who we are seeing now being hospitalized in our ICU are patients who have not been vaccinated or who could not be vaccinated because they were too young to be vaccinated, and then were exposed to someone else who had COVID, who lovingly passed on their COVID to their child or friend, which is very sad.
Musa, you seem to, okay.
Can people see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so, this is a few months ago, 3-4 months ago, I was looking at the side reactions for each vaccine compared to the number of people who were vaccinated. And what we saw so COVID-19 side reactions seem to take really two main trajectories: blood clots in women especially, and heart inflammation in younger men. And what happens with the younger men is there is really a short period of heart inflammation, and they recover with or without treatment. And it's a very small population. And then for the younger women, the cases that were reported, at least for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, was around 44 women out of 14 million people who received the vaccine. And you can look at, so when the doctors here say the risk is minuscule of death, at least it is really 0.0004%, which is even a lower risk to you than getting hit by lightning or maybe dying in a car accident. So when you think about, if you frame it that way, there are many other things that are likely to kill you than the COVID-19 vaccine. That's basically what we are saying. And like I've said, for the cases of heart inflammation in men under 30, there are really no deaths reported here there. It is really a condition that resolves quickly within a few days. The cases of death, generally, this was my own computation, was around 6,000, around 7,000 people out of 363 million people. And these are people who died after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. These are not people who died because of receiving the COVID-19 vaccines. Remember, people are dying all the time of many different various causes. I might receive the vaccine this morning and die 4 days later. If we collect statistics, you will say, well, he died after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine, and the public will think, well, someone is saying he died because he received the COVID-19 vaccine. And so how to make these distinctions is very important. In a global setting like this, people at various ages are dying all the time of different causes. It is not always easy to associate death with the vaccine. It is easier for us to say that people who are vaccinated come show these symptoms like Dr. has said, around arm pain, some malaise and fever for a day or two, and then they are fine. That is well documented. It's part of reactions to the vaccine. But when it comes to the area of death, the only real reactions that have been associated with death are that particular thrombosis, that is blood clots in that specific group of women under 50, and whose cause is still being investigated. And it has an extremely small group of women compared to the larger population. Thank you.
And I'll say that it's also continuing to be monitored very closely, at least in the US.
Yeah.
Anytime that we have somebody in the hospital who has received the vaccine within, I think it's a month, who dies from any cause, we are required to report that to a database. So we did have an example of a 82-year-old man who died of a heart attack a week after receiving his booster dose. Do I think that was related to the booster dose? I don't, because he was 82 with heart disease. He died of heart attack, he had pre-existing heart disease. But that has to be reported, and that is being tracked and monitored. And I know not everybody trusts the system, but this particular system seems very trustworthy in terms of really looking. We don't want the vaccine to be unsafe. We don't want something to come up and, you know, not be found to be trustworthy. So they're looking really closely and on an ongoing basis.
Okay, as I'm clearly forcing your hand, let's talk about herd immunity and why Dr. Kiragu does not want you to chase herd immunity. Just Xerox this slide as I force, as I want us to relate, and this is Kiragu, this would be you and Mulongo. Herd immunity, and then why you would, Dr. Kiragu wouldn't want to chase herd immunity. And I want to just go back to, if you've had a baby, you know why we are very particular. I've owned my medical hat back. Why we are very particular about treating throat infection. It's not just because it's annoying and it will keep you up all night. It's because of the effects it has on your heart and your joints. As the people of ancient times said, strep throat, rheumatic fever licks your joints and bites your heart. And I want us to correlate this to why we should not chase herd immunity. The relation between the strep throat and rheumatic fever took about 400 years to make that connection, and that was when the stethoscope was actually invented. So, Dr. Mulongo, just tell us about herd immunity, and then Dr. Kiragu, tell people why we are not chasing it in this particular situation.
Okay, before Dr. Mlongo answers, I want you to tell me what you mean not to chase herd immunity. What do you mean not to chase?
Not to chase herd immunity through natural infection. Like what people are chasing out here, they're like naturally immunized. Yeah, why you wouldn't? Let me give you an example. The reason why we did oral polio vaccine in Kenya for a long time, as in we've only changed to injectable polio in the recent past, was because in the best book my husband brought from the States when we were in Kenya, everyone poops. Because oral polio is spread through poop. And we were chasing all those people who are vaccine hesitant by just giving oral polio so that when you poop, it spreads to another person. So we achieved a bit of herd immunity in that way. And so some people want us to chase COVID immunity through the same way. Like Diana, I think you would relate to what are they called? Chicken pox birthday parties. Yeah, so my very weird brain. So Dr. Mulongo, just talk about herd immunity and why we are not chasing it naturally, and that's for Dr. Kiragu. And Diana, you can always jump in. You're not chopped liver here.
So herd immunity really is the thinking, which is factual, which is true, that if we have as many people as possible get sick or get infected with COVID-19 and develop immunity, then what happens is that we will end up protecting people who have not been exposed to COVID-19. So if you have, if we live together in one compound in close proximity, the theory is that you need to have almost 70% of us get sick with COVID-19, recover, and then the 30% of who we live with will be protected. So herd immunity is basically as many people getting the disease as possible so that the fewer people who have not been exposed get protected. It is really it's the theory that let's not use vaccines. Let's just let the disease run its course, and the fittest will survive, and those who are not so fit will die. Basically, that is the theory. So you could use herd immunity for non-life-threatening diseases. You could do that for maybe influenza is threatening in some cases, but if you take that approach for non-life-threatening diseases, you could actually get away with it depending on how many people can get hospitalized, how much the hospital can absorb, how mild the infections are, and how long the disease course is, so that life goes on and we don't stop countries and people from being productive and life going on. So I will leave the why we should not take that approach to Andrew, but I was just explaining that people who are advocating herd immunity for COVID-19 are basically saying, don't vaccinate, don't do anything. Let all of us get sick, as many of us get sick, and with time, we will all get protected anyway, and the disease will go away.
Diana, do you have 2 seconds to add before Andrew goes on? And you can always throw in post-polio syndrome, because that you see it in adults.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree, right? You could pursue that. It would be sort of a cynical strategy, right? To say, sure, everybody gets sick, grandma and grandpa should die because they're not fit anymore. And so let's just do it the natural way. But you're going to kill a lot of people doing that. And leave a lot of people, other people disabled, because even those who don't die from severe COVID are not infrequently permanently disabled from a respiratory standpoint.
Okay, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so along with what my colleagues have said, let me just go back a little bit. There are certain diseases that my father, who was a physician, would treat that I, as I did my training, never had the opportunity to see. And this is because of vaccination. So vaccines prevent disease. They make people immune to certain diseases, whether it is measles, chickenpox, diphtheria, pertussis, polio. There are these diseases, smallpox. We don't hear about smallpox because people got vaccinated. And so as a larger number of the population get vaccinated against the disease and become immune to the disease, then that disease has less likelihood to take a foothold and cause disease in even those who are not immunized or protected against the disease. So in other words, the herd, which refers to now the herd of human beings, not the herd of elephants, have then developed immunity to the disease. It doesn't have a place to take a foothold. Now, there are those who talk about allowing, quote unquote, herd immunity to develop to COVID, which is to allow people to get natural immunity to the disease. But to achieve herd immunity from a disease like COVID will mean that more tens of millions of people will die before that herd immunity is achieved. So as Dr. Diebold had mentioned, this is a very cynical approach to say that we are going to let people die because we don't want to enhance the number of people who are protected from developing the disease through vaccination. And to me, this is, every day I struggle with this when I see someone who is sick or who is dying, when I admit a baby who has COVID, and I look at the parents and I wonder, how did you let your child get this disease? We are at the stage right now where COVID is essentially a preventable disease, especially for a country like the United States, other developed countries that have access to free vaccine. You can just walk into a pharmacy and get vaccinated against this disease. So this is a preventable disease that Americans are still dying from out of ignorance in this post-facts world that we live in, where people believe their own facts and are not can very casually spread that information. So I would say that we should not, we should be opposed with every fiber of our beings to this strategy of letting our brothers and sisters die from a disease that is preventable, so that those who have, quote unquote, natural immunity to the disease can then be the people who survive. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm just going to jump in. There's also good evidence that vaccine-mediated immunity is stronger than natural immunity, especially if you had a moderate to mild case of COVID. You are not as well protected from subsequent severe infection from that. Natural sounds good, right? But it's actually not as good as the vaccine-mediated immunity.
And the problem with the natural one, it's very variable. We don't know what you're gonna get and how it's gonna react. So that's why we accept that there's an amount of immunity you mount, and that's why, like, if you got COVID disease, it takes you don't get the vaccine immediately. You take some time for your antibodies to swim in your system, and then you get the manufactured vaccine so that you can mount a proper primary and secondary immune response. And because we've been at it for 1.5 hours and people have to do charge, I just want us to have like our last thoughts, or if there's anything I missed and you think it should have been shared, we can do that. And since it's ladies and gentlemen, or clinicians versus which way do you want to go? We can start with the non-clinician side and then go to the clinician side. So Musa, is there anything?
I was just going to say, Dr. Mlongo, maybe you can expound a little bit on the question in the chat from Atoni, who was asking about vaccine safety in Africa.
Okay, yeah, unmute yourself, Musa, and then just go through Evans's question. And he threw in a new term. We are trying to talk to 12-year-olds here, but just try. Yeah.
I don't think it's a topic we can easily cover here.
Yeah, it's hard.
I have answered him in the complex way that he asked it, because obviously he understands it. It's really, he's basically asking whether vaccines have an impact on structural proteins and their function and how they are produced, and whether you have long-term vaccine safety problems, because by having the vaccine, your proteins are modified in terms of the way they are produced. There is data around vaccines and post-translational modification, which is how proteins are produced and their structures, and how they are decorated. When proteins are produced, they are decorated by methylation and other things. That's basically the field of the epigenetics. Everything that happens after a protein has been produced to make it functional is what he's saying. And he's trying to link that to vaccine safety. There is data that suggests that any kind of infectious disease, any kind of immune response leads to temporary epigenetic effects. But there is no evidence.
Can just break down what epigenetics mean, because people know about genetics, but what are epigenetics?
Epigenetics are effects that are not genetic, that are outside genetics.
You cannot use genetic in explaining epigenetics.
Oh dear. Okay. It is how your proteins function based on the sugars, the carbohydrates they are linked to, based on other functional groups that are not proteins that work together to make you functional. That's really basically what epigenetics is. And Evans is asking whether vaccination has an effect on that part of your biology, okay? On the sugars that make your proteins functional and other and things like that. And what I'm saying to him is that any infectious disease, any vaccine, any foreign molecule has an impact, a temporary impact on that part of your biology, but there is no evidence that that impact is permanent. And just for Evan's sake, I must say that you said, well, we need to follow up and study, do vaccine follow-up studies in Africa, and maybe epigenetics would explain that. I was wondering why vaccine safety in Africa should be special if you focus on epigenetics, but not in Europe and America, where we also have some data. So I don't think that epigenetics, like I've said, there is a very complex thing to study. It is very complex to follow it. And people who study epigenetics, even in my own history of infectious disease immunology, there is a lot of hype around how much epigenetics contributes to particular syndromes, particular safety profiles, and things like that. I would be careful to start poking at epigenetics as the cause for, lack of vaccine safety specifically. I don't think there is enough evidence there. I think if you look at papers, people in expertise in that area, they will be saying quite a bit there, but I'm not sure that at the moment there is evidence of epigenetic modification because of vaccines being a major safety issue. Thank you.
Oh, no, and your last, because I'm winding down. So
my last,
yeah.
No, I just have this last comments which go very close to what Dr. Kiragu talked about, our faith in science. For many years, we have had a lot of faith in science. We have managed to control lots of infectious diseases and some which are non-infectious because of scientific data. When we interact with the general public, when doctors talk to you and explain these things to you, please take a listen, take your read on your own, but not everything that is online is true. It's very important. I have had a deluge of things in my inbox, in my WhatsApp, some relatives asking, is this true? Someone said people who have been vaccinated will die within 2 years. Is this true? So not everything that is online is true. That is the only message I could give out. And continue your faith in science, because we use evidence. And you've heard us say so many times that we don't know, we are not sure, more research is needed. If you listen to people on the other side who spread all these false rumors, they'll never tell you we need more research, we don't know. It will always be, this is the case, this is the case, this is the case, and spewing out very misleading information. For your own sake and the sake of your loved ones, please listen to the science, listen to the doctors, and let's protect ourselves from this disease. Thank you.
Okay, and because you just arranged that on my screen, Diana, you're next.
Boy, I mean, that says it really well. The science is strong. This is one of the most effective vaccines we've ever had. We give influenza vaccines every year that are sort of effective, but not as effective as this COVID vaccine at preventing severe illness and death. It's safe. It's been given to hundreds of millions of people around the world. And the other thing is that COVID is just a terrible disease, right? I mean, if COVID wasn't so bad, we wouldn't be pushing the vaccine so hard, but it is awful to watch people die from COVID who, like Dr. Kiragu said, it's now a preventable disease, and that makes it even sadder.
Okay. Do you know the FDA was okay with licensing a vaccine that was 30% effective? That's how desperate we were. And so this one that is 90%, and when you think about it, all the millions and billions of people who are getting, it, we are in like the biggest vaccine trial ever. As I read through the question that has just come in, Dr. Kiragu, your last thoughts?
Sure. So for me,
it was just a thank you, so it's not a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for this. I think one of the saddest things that I've seen these past 2 years is the politicization of a disease, where we have had people who died or continuing to die because of willful ignorance and misinformation. We have a disease that has resulted in the scientific minds of the world coming together, governments of the world coming together, putting resources into the development of a vaccine to fight a pandemic in record time with established safety and efficacy. So we know it works and it is safe, and multiple vaccines. So I would pray and hope that everyone who is listening, who has the opportunity to talk to others and who has the opportunity to get vaccinated, against COVID to do so. You know, there are those that are always naysayers. There's always somebody who is a naysayer. Here, when we had the measles outbreak in Minnesota, we had anti-vaxxers coming into the Somali community where the measles outbreak was, telling mothers not to vaccinate their children against measles, that they would rather their child gets measles than to get vaccinated, and using fear. So these people are always there, and we have to do our best to fight against those who want, who are misinformed and are trying to misinform others, because we need to do everything we can to make sure that we defeat this illness. It has killed too many people. Too many of our loved ones have died because of this illness. To tolerate any of this nonsense that people keep spewing out here about vaccination and about COVID. Thank you.
So my final thoughts, I have 2 slides. As you can see from the slide, this is online. I mean, this is where the most misinformation is. And you can see we are, and Diana, we've had this conversation about when we were talking about flat earthers. I don't remember when we were watching that video. Like we are, as you can see, we are just in our cocoons, and the messages are not flowing across. And this is one of the reasons we did this, so that you can share this. And as Dr. Musa said, if someone is like 1,000% sure with what they're saying, and they are, and not just saying, we don't know, we need more research, think about what they're saying. It might not be true. The disinformation, misinformation, they're very emotive. They touch at the core of what we believe and things that are painful and hurtful. But we as scientists are just trying to save it's still Sabbath, your lives and everything else. Currently, there are over 300,000 different trials for different medication, different things. We are always on the go, trying to make life better, trying to make life longer, and trying to make life less miserable. You know, I was not going to leave ivermectin alone. As a person who studied infectious disease, this is the slide. This river blindness is a huge, huge problem across in sub-Saharan Africa. The reason we Kenyans don't see a lot of this is, as usual, we were lucky. Someone dropped a drum of DDT in one of the lakes that had one of the rivers that had the vector, and that's how we didn't get we got rid of the vector, and we don't have river blindness. This problem is a huge, huge problem in the West Africa, and ivermectin has been saving lives for years and years alone. Stop calling it the horse medication, dear Americans. Ivermectin works, and it works for other things, not COVID. Thank you very much. Let me see if there's anything else. Okay, eye opener, yes. Thank you very much. We would do Makofi Akilo. Diana, it's Makofi Akilo, our late president. We used to chant and clap 3 times just to say thank you for a good job. Thank you very much. I was very enlightened, and you guys were awesome as usual. Diana, I owe you sweet potatoes. Kiragwe, I owe you coffee. Musa, just go visit my mother. She'll give you chicken.
Give me an address.
I will send it to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much.
And kwaherini. Yeah. You can join us next week. I'm doing dementia.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'm doing dementia, but on Saturday. For my Adventist people, it's on Saturday.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks. It was fun.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Kwaherini. Thank you.
Kwaherini.
Kwaheri.
Kwaheri. Yeah, imation.
Kwaheri. Thanks, Bosa. It was good.
Oh, you're welcome. And you can share it's on Facebook.
Na wewe upande wa pili.
Okay, sawa. Thank you. Okay, now. Somebody needs to end it. Oh, I need to leave. Or let me leave.